Hello, my name is Boris Giltburg. I am a pianist, and this is a tutorial on Liszt's leggierezza, the second of his Trois Études de concert. Liszt, in his day as a pianist, was the greatest star on the horizon of classical music of the time, and his abilities at the keyboard surpassed anything that anyone can do. This is most strongly shown in his 12 Études d'exécution transcendante, but here in the Trois Études de concert, which he wrote slightly later, we see a beautiful blend of musicality and technique, each serving each other, neither becoming more prominent than the other. It starts with a kind of cadenza for the cello, and by saying that this is a cadenza for the cello, of course, it is for the piano. But I think applying the thinking that this is a string instrument with the challenges and resistance that one has when playing a string instrument, because it is not a difficult part for us. We could just play. But this feels flat and not interesting. But by lending it a sense of resistance, the fact that it's difficult to get up to the higher note, we can create a much more interesting line. So how do we do this practically? Two elements. One, a kind of super legato or legato of the fingers, whereby we hold the note slightly longer than we should have to do normally. If the normal legato would be, now if you hold it a little bit longer, it gives this thick triacly feeling which helps it to acquire body and texture. And the second thing, as we go up with the line and with the crescendo which Liszt wrote, to stretch slightly the approach to the high note. This maybe is more of a vocal thing, not just a string instrument thing. Again, this feeling that it takes us an effort to get to the high note. And this idea of how to get to a high note in the phrase is something that will accompany us throughout the etude. So we have the first line, the second, and now we begin a series of waves. He writes accelerando, but I think it's not a continuous accelerando, but rather a series of steps whereby the right hand rushes forward and the left hand holds it back. And in this tug and pull between the hands, we create the build-up and the tension. On the downbeats of bars 4, 5, 6, and 7, I would take the upper note of the left hand with the right hand. Liszt probably had a very big hand, and for him this was easy and not a thing. For us, it's quite a bit of a stretch for most of us, and we don't really lose much by putting the left hand note into the right hand. And now we have a series of high notes. So we had this, and this, and this, and this, which you repeat several times. So with a kind of insistence, pleading. So this build-up of more dynamic, more tempo, the left hand pulling back will create such a sense of arrival and release when we finally go back from the climax. Here with these chromatic descending harmonies, once again, holding the notes for a little bit longer than you would expect. Will accentuate the dramatic tension inherent in the harmonies, and also enjoy very much the harmony which you get on the downbeat and the beginning of each group with the suspended upper voice. This kind of almost heart-tugging dissonance. And then going out of it, the single line remains. This could be once again thought as a recitativo line, so not just but each one a separate group, 1, 2nd, and 3rd. Why to do this? Just to make this more interesting, more appealing to the ear. If it's all the same, without any grouping, without any phrasing, it's just flat, whereas this gives it life and 3D-ness. Then we get to the main theme. Left hand, very light and flowing. I would hold the bottom note slightly longer, as if it were almost a quarter note. Because it accentuates the descending bass. Just quite a bass. And the sinking right hand. So once again we have this idea of how to approach the high note, which of course is not the high note but a high note, and the long note in the phrase. It's like a focal point. So I would stretch it and once again accentuate the effort it takes us to get to the note, all within this egualmente instruction which he gave us, which means equally and thus not too much rubato. So you probably heard just a small stretch. Then much of the material that comes now will be made from the same cloth. Every time we have these big intervals, we can stretch them and treat the high notes like a distant little bell, crystal. The main motive, which will come many times throughout the etude, so we can accentuate it a little bit. And again. We could do this little accelerando in bars 18, 19, just because it's just one line left and it is eager to get to the higher octave. Then coming out of this world of minor, we have a little section in a major key. Which introduces us to the challenge of playing legato in 6. So the trick to that, first of all, he gave us fingerings that can be helpful, but also in some places they imply a very big hand, which not every one of us has. The key thing though is to have a full legato in the upper voice, because that's the one the ear is naturally attracted to. And then if the lower voice is not completely or not always legato, that's fine. As long as we can hear, then it means even if some of them are just played the thumb, thumb, with the pedal it will still sound legato. Or thumb, thumb, but you can still hear this as a legato. And this I'll try to play with as little rubato as possible. The danger is that if we do it as a little wave, it makes it all unsteady and makes us, both performers and listeners, slightly seasick. So concentrate the rubato on the melodic elements and not on the accompaniment. Every time he repeats the material an octave higher or lower, you can look for a different color. If it's higher, a more crystalline, pure sound. And also try to maintain the purity of the pedal. So as you can hear, there's a lot of chromaticism here. And we don't want these on the same pedal or these, because it's just not clean and clouded. Continuing, become a little bit more passionate, and you can once again lead more with the descending bass. it doesn't have all to be in the same tempo. It is Liszt, his pure romanticism in his soul, and if the music requires an influx of energy and passion, by all means go forward, like here. Or here, when he writes Forte Appassionato, this can be still in full swing. And then we are gradually getting towards what will eventually be the main material of the etude, which is not the theme, but rather the variation on a theme in beautiful filigrane figurations. But together we still need to go through a few bars, and this, like a frightening chord in both hands, almost a theatrical gesture. And then these pearls of sound cascading down the keyboard. So when you're practicing them, definitely work on every note on its own with a lot of finger activity. So imagine that you have little teeth at the tip of your fingers and you are literally biting or plucking the key. You can work first staccato, relaxed wrist, relaxed forearm, and just very active fingers. And then gradually incorporate the legato into this. But even when you play it in full tempo, don't play it at the faster tempo than the one at which you can still hear all the notes. So at the time, the concept of what they called jeu perlé, pearled sound or pearled playing, was very much a thing. And the idea is that every single note is perfectly formed and rounded. And we find it in Chopin's music and definitely in Liszt as well. So it's not just taking the hand and brushing it down the keyboard, but ideally every single note clearly defined. And the very same thing applies to what happens from bar 41 until the end of the etude. So we have this sort of wind going up and down the keyboard. But to work on that, we need to work slowly with every finger articulating clearly. The left hand is steady, and the right hand is quite free around. If you don't really hit the exact downbeats, it's not the end of the world. As long as you get to the right ending point and the end of each phrase. But you'll find that he wrote it in such an organic and pianistically fine way that you naturally align on the right notes on each group. Now, what to do with pedal? It cannot be a single pedal, because then we lose clarity. But of course we need pedal, because without it, it is really not the effect that the music implies, I think. So just finding the right amount of pedal to create this continuity, but switching it, changing it, cleaning it often enough so we don't get clouded too much. On the big passage going up and down in 44, group your hand. This is one group, then a second, a third, and now practicing it slowly in groups will help you then control it when it's in a faster tempo. And it's fine to have slight accelerandos or ritenutos within each phrase. So if you feel, for example, that you want to stretch it as it goes up, or go forward and stretch a bit here, everything which feels natural and organic to the music is fine. Then this little passage going down. He suggests playing it always 3-1, 4-2, 3-1, 4-2. An alternative fingering could be to play it, start with 3, but then do 5, 4, 3, 5, 3, 5, 3, 5, 4, 3, 5, 3. So groups of. See what works best for your hand. The next little bit of new material will come in bar 53 when we have these thrills. So I would keep it with a very clean pedal if we can, and again as little rubato as possible. Why as little rubato as possible? Because we previously had these winds going up and down the keyboard, quite probably with some accelerandi and ritenuti, and it's nice for a contrast to have something a little bit more steady, stable, and the left hand, which just stays on the same harmony, also suggests a kind of stability and steadiness. Then we're approaching the middle section. And here he passes the melody to the left hand. I would play it with a very heavy thumb, a relaxed wrist leaning into the thumb part of the hand. Let's say the upper voice in the left hand is probably 2 dynamic levels above the other voices. So don't really pay attention to what this voice is doing. It will be there to support the left hand quite enough. And the right hand, which exists in 2 versions. I'm a strong advocate of the ossia here, so that simply because the chromatic nature of this line corresponds so well with the chromaticism which we encounter throughout the etude. Fingering, legato for the upper voice, 5, 4, 5, 4, 3, 5, 3, 5, 4, 5, 4, 3. And you can do thumb, thumb on groupings of 2 white notes. So if it's C and B, that would be thumb, thumb, and F and E would be thumb, thumb as well. Otherwise, if it's white note, black note, of course it's thumb too. Again, it doesn't really matter if here the thumb, thumb is not a pure legato. As long as the upper voice is legato, it will be sounding legato to our ears. And structurally, we have 3 phrases, each one a step above the one that came before in intensity. So, step up, so you can really concentrate on this upper, on this line going up. Then the same thing again. And finally it stays on the same harmony, and then we have several lines going up. In bar 66, again. Once again to this double diminished chord, which Liszt uses in crucial structural points. So especially from bar 66, really concentrate on the left hand, and the right hand just leave to its own accord. But to leave it to its own accord, it needs to play the right notes. To do that, several things that can help us. So groupings. One group, then you move your hand to the second group and the third. This one, you can play the D flat and the E flat with the thumb, because just playing it with the second requires a quite uncomfortable change to the wrist. And the same thing. So this, of course, has to be 1-2, but the G and the A once again can be with the thumb. And here, really concentrate on the left hand. This is the culmination of this motive as it appeared in the beginning. And And the right hand, because it's so high and so loud, it doesn't really need any special care or attention. But definitely do these little waves of crescendo, which he implies. One, then drop a little bit, and again. Then presto, with a lot of fingers. The left hand I would play everything with 4, 3, 2. And use the time you have between each group to move your hand to the next group's position. So I'm playing with the right hand and already moving the left hand to the next one, and the same thing. The left hand usually will be above the right hand. Here you can take a bit of time, make it a bit more rhetorical, and then launch again into a faster tempo. This, as you can see, I'm also playing with 4, 3, 2, just because having the thumb here requires a tensing of the wrist, which is not ideal. And then out of all this drama, we remain with the quiet material once again. A beautiful sequence going down. 3 steps going down, so you can find 2 changes. For example, in the second change, you could, in the second time this group appears, you could show a bit more the first of each group in the left hand. Or you could take una corda, or you could take una corda in the third one. So whatever idea you have, as long as we have a color change every single time. And then bar 79 brings us up to what could have been a climax, but instead it's just a magical relaxation into a beautiful major. And I believe this place deserves quite a bit of time, so I would slow down quite a bit in the end of bar 79 and let this take all the time you need to produce a beautiful crystalline sound. And enjoy this difference between the G sharp and the A sharp. It's a good question whether he wrote the G sharp here because his keyboard ended in an A, so he could not have written. But perhaps this is the case where the limitation of the keyboard led him into this beautiful idea of G sharp, A sharp, G sharp, A sharp. End of bar 85, he writes poco ritardando in the middle of the bar. It could also begin already in the beginning of the bar. And here it can really become recitativo-like. Then the coda until the last bar is more or less the same material. One bar that needs discussion is bar 92. It's a very complex passage in sixth. My advice would be, from the second beat of the bar, to take the lower note in the left hand. So you play the beginning as written, but from here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. It's quite comfortable, and it is always steady and safe, and you also then are less stressed before this plays, which is better. Here, clean pedal. So change it at least between every group, sometimes maybe twice per group in the beginning, here. And then these notes, like little bells. And this last one can be really special and personal, like a forlorn sound, like Oiseau Triste by Ravel. And just let it ring. And then back to a full-bodied string or singing sound. Concentrate on the theme, of course. I would take the A flat in the right hand. just to make it more comfortable. Here, make sure that the D flat is audible. And the release. He writes the same chord 4 times, so we need to do something. Maybe a little crescendo towards the third one and a diminuendo towards the fourth. It could be one option. If you wanted, you could break the last chord. To give a very musical, magical ending to this etude. This is the end of this Henle music tutorial. Thank you very much for watching.